For centuries, sailors and fishermen spoke in hushed tones about the Blackwater, a notorious ship said to be cursed. The legend told of a crew that vanished without a trace, and the ship was doomed to drift aimlessly across the oceans. No one who encountered the Blackwater lived to tell the tale except for those whose minds were shattered by the terror of what they had seen. It was said that the ship appeared only on nights when the fog was thick, its sails tattered, and its hull drenched in the blood of the lost crew. The captain's voice, they whispered, could still be heard calling out through the mist, searching for a way to break the curse that bound them to the sea for eternity. In the present day, marine archaeologist Olivia Palmer had heard these legends all her life. She never believed in ghosts or curses. Her work was grounded in facts, in science. But when an old, battered journal surfaced from the depths of the ocean, its pages detailing the last known voyage of the Blackwater, her curiosity was piqued. Olivia, along with a small team of seasoned sailors and scientists, set out to find the truth behind the myth. They boarded their ship, the Horizon, and set sail toward the coordinates mentioned in the journal. But as the fog rolled in and the winds grew still, an eerie sense of dread began to creep over the crew. The first few days of the voyage were uneventful. The crew maintained their course, and the mood on the Horizon was one of anticipation. But on the fourth night, as the fog rolled in thicker than ever, one of the crew members spotted something in the distance. There, he whispered, pointing toward the mist, a ship. At first, it seemed impossible. It was too far out, just a shadow in the fog. But as the crew watched, the outline of the Blackwater became clearer, its broken sails flapping silently in the windless air. Olivia stood frozen, staring at the ghostly vessel that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. The crew exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared to speak. Despite the crew's unease, Olivia insisted on boarding the Blackwater. The scientific opportunity was too great to pass up. Armed with flashlights and equipment, Olivia and 3 others rowed across the still waters and climbed aboard the cursed ship. The air was heavy, thick with an unnatural silence. The deck was covered in dust, and the ship creaked as if it were alive. The eerie stillness made their footsteps echo louder than they should have. There were no signs of life, no bodies, but the ship felt wrong, like something was watching them. As they ventured deeper into the ship, Olivia found old maps, tattered logs, and strange carvings etched into the wood. But there was no explanation for what had happened to the crew. Suddenly, one of the team members screamed. They turned to find him staring at a mirror, his reflection showing something impossible, a ghostly figure standing behind him, its eyes hollow and dead. The horror on the Blackwater had only begun. That night, back on the Horizon, the crew member who had seen the reflection was found dead in his cabin. His face was twisted in terror, and there were deep, unnatural cuts on his arms, as if something had clawed at him from within. The rest of the crew panicked. Some demanded they turn back, others insisted the ship was cursed, and Olivia found herself torn between fear and the need to understand what was happening. As the crew debated, the Blackwater appeared again, closer this time, as though it were following them. And in the distance, they could hear faint, eerie whispers carried on the wind. That night, the fog thickened, and the crew of the Horizon began hearing voices, disembodied cries and laughter echoing through the air. As the hours passed, the whispers grew louder, until they seemed to be all around them. In the dim light of the moon, Olivia saw figures moving on the deck of the Blackwater, ghostly shapes of sailors, their faces gaunt and twisted. They were the lost crew, forever trapped in a loop of torment, their souls bound to the ship by a curse they could never escape. The crew of the Horizon was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or look away. It was as if the ship was drawing them in, feeding on their terror. Desperate for answers, Olivia revisited the journal. She read through its final pages, written by the Blackwater's captain, who spoke of an artifact they had stolen during their last voyage, an ancient, forbidden relic that cursed them all. The artifact, the captain wrote, had once belonged to a powerful and vengeful spirit, and taking it from its resting place had sealed their fate. The crew was doomed to haunt the seas forever, unless the artifact was returned. But by the time they realized this, it was too late. Olivia knew they had to find the artifact, or they would suffer the same fate as the cursed crew. The artifact was hidden somewhere on the Blackwater, and Olivia was determined to find it. She convinced the remaining crew members to board the ship again, though fear had gripped them all. As they searched the ship's bowels, they encountered more strange phenomena: doors that opened and closed on their own, voices calling their names, and glimpses of figures just out of sight. One by one, the crew began to lose their grip on reality, but Olivia pressed on, eventually finding a locked chest in the captain's quarters. Inside was the artifact, a small, blackened stone engraved with strange symbols. As she touched it, a wave of cold washed over her, and she knew they were running out of time. With the artifact in hand, Olivia thought they might be free of the curse, but the ship had other plans. The crew of the Horizon began to experience terrifying hallucinations, seeing the faces of the dead in every shadow, hearing the screams of the lost sailors in every gust of wind. One by one, the crew members succumbed to the madness. Some threw themselves into the sea, convinced that drowning was a better fate than staying on board. Others turned on each other, driven mad by the whispers that filled their minds. Olivia was left alone, haunted by the ghostly crew, who now seemed to be following her everywhere she went. As if to mirror the growing chaos on board, a violent storm appeared on the horizon. The sea churned, and the waves rose higher and higher, threatening to swallow the Horizon whole. Olivia knew they had to return the artifact, but with most of the crew gone or dead, there was no one left to help her. She stood on the deck, clutching the cursed stone, as the storm raged around her. Suddenly, the Blackwater loomed in the distance, its ghostly form cutting through the fog like a phantom. It was calling to her, drawing her in. In the midst of the storm, Olivia rowed back to the Blackwater, knowing it was the only way to end the curse. The waves crashed against the ship, but she held tight to the artifact, determined to break the spell. As she boarded the cursed ship one last time, the ghostly crew appeared before her, their hollow eyes filled with rage and despair. The captain stood at the helm, his face twisted in fury. "You brought this upon us," he hissed, his voice like the wind itself. "And now you will join us." But Olivia was ready. She held up the artifact, and as she did, the storm seemed to still. The spirits howled in anguish, and the Blackwater began to creak and groan if the ship itself was tearing apart. With a final surge of strength, Olivia threw the artifact into the sea. The moment it disappeared beneath the waves, the ghostly crew let out a final, chilling wail, and the Blackwater began to sink into the depths. Its curse finally lifted. The storm dissipated, and the Horizon floated quietly on the now calm sea. Olivia, exhausted and alone, watched as the cursed ship vanished beneath the water, taking its terrible history with it. Though the Blackwater was gone, the memory of its horrors would stay with Olivia forever. The sea had claimed the cursed ship, but the story of the Blackwater and its doomed crew would continue to haunt the waters for generations to come. And sometimes, when the fog rolled in thick and the night was still, sailors swore they could still hear the faint echo of a ship's bell, tolling endlessly for the souls lost at sea.